Welcome back to Gaskin Point. Today we'll be trying the brand new Found North release, Hoover Hawk. So Hoover Hawk released just a couple weeks ago, and Found North, if you're not too familiar with them, they blend Canadian whiskeys, and they blend some really old Canadian whiskeys, sometimes 22, 24, 27-year Canadian whiskey even, and they blend corn whiskey, malt whiskey, rye whiskey. It really depends on the blend. They finish them in wine barrels and American barrels and all these different interesting things, and they make some really good concoctions. And I've done 2 reviews on Found North already. Found North Batch 9 I threw into a flight with Canadian whiskeys many months ago when I first started this channel, and I tried Found North Batch 10. It was absolutely incredible, genuinely one of the best bottles on the market, even at its secondary value about $175, $180. Totally worth it for that quality of wheat whiskey. And today we'll be trying the Hoover Hawk, the brand new special edition release. Now they've done 2 special editions already. Now they've done Peregrine, which many believe is by far the best Found North product. I've tried it. I don't particularly think it's that special, especially relative to a lot of the newer batches, to the other special release Helldiver. I just don't think it's all that. But people spend $650, even $700 for that bottle on secondary markets because there are only about 1,000 bottles of it that exist. Helldiver had 2,000. It was the second special release, also very popular, but its secondary value had plummeted to about $300 because there were just so many more bottles. And Hoover Hawk here has over 4,000 bottles, and so its secondary is about $250. But that isn't really an indication of the quality of the whiskey. It's much more an indication of the quantity of the whiskey. And I'm all for huge quantities if the whiskey's really good. So today we're going to try it. We're going to find out if it's all that. And we'll be comparing it to Found North Batch 6 here. Now, Found North is up to Batch 10 right now, and they do their batches, they do their special releases, and then they also have single barrels. So that's really the 3 things that their company is doing right now. And they're awesome. I mean, these guys, it's because they're sourcing whiskeys and they're blending whiskeys, there is certainly an incredible art to their blending of whiskey, and they're really able to utilize the skills that they've built up in, I imagine, many years of whiskey experience. And because they're not distilling, they don't have to wait 25 years to make this amazing whiskey. And so I'm expecting we'll see a lot of Found North in the future, which I'm excited about. But we're going to warm up here with some Found North Batch 6. I haven't tried this yet. I've tried Batch 8, 9, and 10. But I haven't gone back and tried earlier batches, although I do have samples of a lot of the earlier batches, so maybe one day we'll do a nice Found North flight. But I just wanted to try this here with you guys because I haven't tried it already, and then we'll get into Hoover Hawk. We'll see just how much it compares to a batch product that, to my understanding, is really run-of-the-mill, very solid, definitely not a bad one, definitely not a particularly amazing one, but let's just get right into it and see. So this is a blend of between 17 and 23-year-old whiskeys. It's over 85% corn whiskey to my understanding, and then some rye, and there may be some malted barley. I'm actually not sure. I'll put all the details on your screen if I haven't already. Yeah, I mean, this one is definitely corn heavy on the nose. Definitely a good one of ethanol heat on this. Now, these have both been sitting for about 30 minutes. Considering their age, I thought it was best to really let them sit and air out, but clearly smelling still a little bit tight, which I think is an indication of just how hot 30-year-old cask strength Canadian whiskey can be, or 23-year-old, or whatever it is. Yeah, I mean, you're getting some of the corn here. You're getting caramel corn sweetness. You're definitely getting a nice rich oak. You're getting some baking spice, some nutmeg, some vanilla. And there's definitely a pretty strong rye spice in this, which is interesting. There's a lot of heat. It smells very hot. I believe it's about 123 proof. And so there's a good amount of heat on this, and definitely smells much hotter than 123 proof, but let's try it. Okay, that's really good. Cherry candy right at the beginning. Really nice cherry candy. Gets into a nice caramel. Definitely a lot of heat. Definitely a pretty strong oak presence on this, but kind of like a lighter oak. But there's a lot of it. Like, it's not a super tannic oak, a super rich oak. It's much more of a kind of lighter, relaxing oak flavor profile here. Like kind of a nice fresh oak. But there's a lot of that kind of fresh oak, light oak kind of thing. If that makes sense. Hopefully that makes sense. But it's good. It's very good. I think you're looking at some white pepper towards the late palate here, but there's a ton of sweetness on this. I mean, these Canadian Found North batches, I mean, they're just incredible. In my opinion, they're probably the second best Canadian whiskeys down here. I actually do have, the group that I'm in, New Era, actually does have these Obtainium picks here. And so, you know, maybe we should try this alongside the Hoover Hawk. We're going to try it. So this is Obtainium, which is also Canadian whiskey. It's 160 proof, 27 year, and we'll drink that last just because it's going to need a few minutes to open up. But yeah, what I was saying is that Found North to me is really like second caliber Canadian whiskey. I think the Nashville Barrel Company 33, 34 year, 150-ish proof Canadian whiskeys, the few that I've tried have been absolutely incredible. And so that's really the best of the best to me. I think those are really almost like a George T. Stagg level for Canadian whiskey. I mean, they're really incredible. Found North has consistently been kind of second tier for me. I think they're consistently in like the low eights, whereas I think the National Beer Companies are probably mid eights. And then I was going to say Obtainium is kind of like high sevens for the most part. Although this is a pick from the New Era Bourbon Club. It's 160 proof. Like I said, it's actually 29 years, I take it back. And it's kind of like a Christmas edition. I think there's supposed to be a sticker on here, but I didn't put it on yet. But anyways, I wanted to try it, and I guess we're going to toss this into the flight as well here, and we'll get to that in a second. But anyways, I typically think Obtainium is just not nearly as good as Canadian whiskey, but this was about $150. So we'll get to that in a second, but let's continue here with our Found North Batch 6, which is supposedly second tier, and this Obtainium is third tier. However, this is finished in Armagnac barrels. It's actually specifically finished in Joseph Magnus Cigar Blend barrels. So that one might be a pretty special Obtainium. All the single barrel 150, 160 proof Obtainiums that I've tried have just not competed with Found North to me, which is like 120, 130 proof, but much more refined, really younger as well, which is really interesting, but it's just much better. I think when you're really blending different profiles, they're just better than the single barrels. But anyways, I digress quite a bit. Let's try this Found North Batch 6. Let's give it a rating. We'll go on to the Hover Hawk, and then we'll try this crazy 160 proof Obtainium and see if it can hold its own. I mean, that's really good. That's pure cherry candy. And there's a good amount of caramel on this. There's some vanilla, some maple on this. I typically get a lot of maple as the sweetness factor in Canadian whiskeys, and that might just be because I associate Canada with maple, but I think that's super solid. I think it's very enjoyable. I think that's going to be an 8.2. I think it's really right on par. Actually, I'm going to drop to an 8.1 just because I do like Batch 9 and Batch 10 more, and I think I rated Batch 9 an 8.2 and Batch 10 an 8.3, and I do think it's really good. It is slightly more straightforward than those batches. I think this is like just pure sweetness on this, which is really nice and very enjoyable, and honestly, like, if I'm comparing this to Stag Junior, which is usually my benchmark for an 8, I think it's really right there. And I think that's a really nice batch, but let's try Hover Hawk here. Let's see if it's any better, and then we'll get to our crazy 160 proof Obtainium, which I just totally extemporaneously decided that we're going to be comparing it here today. So, Hover Hawk is a mix of 22, 23, 24, and 27-year corn whiskey, and 15 and 18-year rye whiskey, I believe. Don't really remember if there's any malt whiskey in this. I'll put it all on your screen right now, but there is a very nice big age statement of 15 years. And I will say, a lot of my friends won this batch. So actually, thank you to my good buddy James Junkins, who actually shared this sample here with me. Really, really generous of him. I didn't even ask for it. He just said, have you tried it? No, and then he sent it to me. So, really couldn't have done this review without him. So thank you, James. Wow, on the nose here, much sweeter than on a batch 6. I think the palate on batch 6 was really sweet relative to the nose. But the nose here was much more corn forward, a little bit, honestly, smells a little bit younger, cheaper. This is much richer. I think there's a really nice sweet corn sweetness on this. Definitely a good amount of cherry on this as well. Caramel, some vanilla, some maple. Good amount of maple, actually. Good amount of nutmeg, cinnamon. It's actually not a super unique flavor profile. There's slightly less heat coming off of this than the batch 6, which I think is for the best because there's honestly a little bit too much heat coming off the nose on batch 6. But overall, there's a lot going on here. Let's try it. Wow. So that tastes much more refined than the batch 6. I think we have much more of like a cherry candy. And to me, when whiskey is more refined, it's the comparison between like tasting kind of orange peel or citrus versus trying like orange candy. I think in the cherry department, it's the same thing. Where it's like, you could taste the fruit of cherries, but when you really get into like a cherry candy richness, I mean, that's just a different level to me of sweetness. And this is much more of that cherry candy. Definitely a slightly darker profile than the batch 6. But I will say, on the first sip, not blowing batch 6 away by any means. It's honestly pretty similar caliber. It's just different. And I think that's generally the theme with these special releases. I really don't think that they're all that much better than the batch products. The batch products are really, really good. And these special releases are also just massively batched products too. So I don't know why they don't just release them as batch 11, 12, 13. I guess it drives more hype this way, and people will know the name of these whiskeys that way. I mean, to me, as over time, this is really opening up in that cherry. It's starting to really become a fruit bomb in a way that I think batch 6 just wasn't really doing. But there's still a lot of cherry and a good amount of maple here. Definitely a good amount of oak presence as well, and the nutmeg is definitely growing. But nothing is growing like the cherry candy. Let's try it again. It's good. I don't really think I like it any better than batch 6. I think it's really cherry candy forward, but I honestly think batch 6 also had a caramel candy on it. I'm almost thinking batch 6 might be better here. I will go back to batch 6, take that final sip, go back to the batch of Hover Hawk, and then we'll try the Obtainium later. Let's see here, batch 6. Yep, see, batch 6 is sweeter, but it's also a little bit rougher on the edges. Like, there's kind of like an oatsness to it, kind of like a cheap, rough, whiskey on it. Like a strong ethanol heat as well on the palate that kind of makes this taste cheap in a way that I don't think is existing in the Hover Hawk, but I think the Hover Hawk, beyond that, the profile is a little bit worse. So this is actually a fun comparison here. I tend to not like whiskey that tastes a little bit cheap, especially with whiskey that MSRP is $150. I'm expecting pretty fine whiskeys. I mean, its MSRP, I think, is higher than, the BTAC collection, and so we're expecting high things. Expect good things with your whiskey. Don't settle with whiskey. Life is too short to settle for bad whiskey. Really, just drink the best. And let's see if Hover Hawk here is really the best. We'll take another sip here, and then we'll try to save a little bit, and then we'll go on to the Obtainium. Hopefully it's opened up a little bit in about 5-10 minutes, and we'll try it. I'm sure this bottle is going to develop like crazy, so I'm glad we got it open now, and we'll try it again at some point soon, and probably give it its own video at some point, but we'll get there. It's good. No, it's better. It's better than batch 6. The batch 6 is a little rougher on the edges. This, to me, you have the cherry, and over time you are getting more maple on it, so you are getting the two kind of different sweetnesses. You have a fruity sweetness and like just your natural like maple sweetness as well. But you also have a nice oak background to it. It's not that good though. Like this isn't worth, I think, anything more than any of the batch products. I think batch 9 is really similar to this. I think batch 10 is probably slightly better. I'm going to rate the Hover Hawk an 8.2. I don't think it's something you need to desperately run out and buy. I kind of understand why its secondary isn't that much higher than its MSRP. I think it's kind of cruising on the fact that it's a special release, which is good for Found North, which is probably why they did this and didn't just make this batch 11. But yeah, I mean, I've tried Helldiver, I've tried Peregrine. Maybe we'll put them all together in a flight one day, but it's just not that much better. It's just really not something that I think beats the batched products. And I think for $75, $100 cheaper, the batch products are just a better bang for your buck. But let's try this Obtainium here. This Obtainium also had an MSRP of $150, and let's just see how much weirder it is now that we're doing a kind of bigger Canadian flight. Wow, that's weird. So it actually kind of does smell like Joseph Magnus cigar blend on the nose here. Kind of getting like some nice berries, which I typically get on the Joseph Magnuses. I don't think I have cigar blend anywhere here. Actually, I have this, which is Murray Hill Club Bourbon Whiskey. So I guess I'll put this out here for now. This is not what it's finished in, but it's the same company, and this is just their offering that's right below cigar blend, and I think this is like $110. So I have that, at least. If you're not familiar with cigar blend, it's about $185 MSRP. And at this point, it sits on the shelves everywhere, at least in Connecticut. I mean, I could find 2 cases of it if I went out to like 3 stores that have just been sitting for months and months because, while it's an amazing bottle of whiskey, it's kind of fallen into the trap of having too much quantity. And so people just don't really care as much to be buying it now when they know they could buy it in 2 months from now. It's kind of how allocation works. If people know that they can just spend the exact same money in 2 months and buy it, why would they buy it now? And then they'll just buy it when they really, really feel like buying it, which sometimes is never. And that's why companies like Rare Character, who are very explicit about never wanting their whiskeys to sit on the shelf are really effective if they can do that. So, anyways, I digress. There are a lot of digressions in this video. Okay, there's definitely some tobacco on here. It's definitely a darker flavor profile. There's vanilla, there's a little bit of maple, cherry, caramel. Really, really interesting. More complex than any of the Found Norths. Like, I think the Found Norths were just sweeter in general, but there wasn't much else to it. I think this isn't actually all that sweet. But it also doesn't smell all that different from the Obtainiums that I've typically rated in the high 7s. So let's try it here. Now, I will say, obviously, this isn't that fair of a comparison. This is 160 proof. This should have sat for about 30 minutes. I just didn't want to let it sit for 30 minutes. I wanted to try it here with you guys today. You guys saw me crack the bottle. But we'll see how it does now, and we'll revisit it after it opens up a little, because I also think the neck pour on this bottle is probably not a fair comparison as to how it will be on the rest of the bottle, but we have the bottle now, so, we'll try it. And I do have a few backups sitting somewhere in the background here, so, that'll be fun, too, to get to at some point. Wow. That's hot. That's really good, though. Oh, my God. There's a lot of flavor there. And there are so many different elements. So you definitely have the tobacco. You definitely have like a nice smoke to it. But you also have a really rich cherry candy. You also have caramel. You also have nutmeg. You have cinnamon. Really strong cinnamon. Oh my God. That's really good. That's interesting. That's not good for the Found North here, because there's just so much flavor there. It's obviously not drinking 160 proof, because I think if it drank 160 proof, I'd die. That being said, it's not like there are that many things that are 160 proof to compare this to, and so this could just be what 160 proof tastes like. People tend to have all their opinions on how something drinks, and people always tend to say things drink a little bit lower than what they actually are. And it's just sometimes I think people don't realize that they've just made their palate more acclimated to higher proofs, and 125 proof just tastes like 115 proof used to be to some people. I know I've had some things that are 120 proof that just kind of taste light to me now, and I wonder where that'll take me, because I'm 22 years old, and hopefully a long life of whiskey drinking and enjoying with you guys ahead. Okay, there's smoke, there's cherry, there's caramel, there's rye spice, there's cinnamon, there's nutmeg. Honestly, there's also like a little bit of rum notes on there, like that kind of vanilla rum on it. That I don't absolutely love, because I don't really like rum. Like a nice like vanilla extract, which is the positive stuff of the rum. But there's also like kind of like that cheap oak that I get in rum. But there's also a rich oak on this. I mean, there are multiple kinds of oak. You're looking at a 29-year, 160 proof expression. Just imagine if a bourbon had those stats. I mean, even Willett never ended up sourcing a 29-year whiskey. The oldest they ever got, to my understanding, were 28, and they only got 3 barrels of that. And I don't think they were anywhere close to 160 proof. So it's just crazy how Canadian whiskey is. And if you're curious why it's like that, it's because in Canadian whiskey, they don't have any limitations. With bourbon, it has to enter the barrel at 125 proof. So even if you distill it higher, even if before going to the barrel, you kind of have like this moonshine mash that's 125 proof, you have to water it down at most to 125. And most distilleries then respond by always entering the barrel at 125 proof. But that's why hazmat is so rare, because it has to gain 15 proof by losing that much water. And that's why like things like Wild Turkey, where their barrel entry proof is like 110 proof, are really interesting, because they choose to not even get close to that 125. But Canadian whiskey, they can enter the barrel at 180 if they wanted to. And some do enter at like 170, 180. 29 years in oak. Let's take another sip here. Wow. That's fire. Wow. That's really hot. There's a lot of cherry on that. There's a lot of tobacco on that. There's so much going on there. Oh my God. Wow. That was tough to get down. That's really good. I mean, that's really good. So much more flavor, so much more heat. That bottle is probably going to change drastically over the course of its lifetime. And I'm glad I have the bottle, because I will see how it changes over the course of its lifetime. But obviously you guys came here for Overhawk. At least, I think you came here for Overhawk. So we will go back and take the last sip of Overhawk here. I think I'm done with Obtainium for now. I think it's very hot. You have similar elements to it, but really so much heat to it and so much oak to it, especially at that age. Because this is a single barrel that's 29 years old. I think Overhawk, you're looking at an average age of closer to about 20 years, 22 years. And so that 9 years, I mean, they're noticeable. There's so much going on that Obtainium whiskey. And I think it definitely needs more air. It probably should have sat here for 45 minutes, but I wanted to try it. But it definitely, the oak tastes a little bit tight. It seems like it needs to open up a little to get more sweetness on it. But I still like it. And honestly, my preliminary rating on this one is going to be an 8.4. But I think it could really compete with those Nashville barrel companies if we get to it later on. But we'll get there. I mean, we'll let that go for now. Let's go back to Overrock. Let's take the final sip. Let's give it a rating. I mean, I already rated it 8.2. But let's just confirm that rating, and then we'll call it a day here. So much sweeter. And in comparison, it's so light. So light, relaxing, sweet. It's really nice. I don't think that's worth it. I don't think it's worth secondary. I think it's worth MSRP. I think I pay MSRP on it. If you found it in the store for that, definitely, take the risk and try it. I think it's really good, but I wouldn't pay $250 for it. I wouldn't pay $300 for it. I think the batch products are just going to be where it's at if you're going to pay secondary, because the secondary on them are basically MSRP anyways. Yeah, that's Overhawk. That's Obtainium. That's Found North Batch 6. I had a lot of fun here. I'm going to enjoy this last little sip here, probably off camera, because I'm probably going to let it sit for about 10 minutes and we'll see. But I hope you all enjoyed the video. I had a lot of fun. We tried a bunch of Canadian whiskeys. Canadian whiskeys are high in proof and they'll creep up on you. So definitely don't let them creep up on you too hard. But that was a lot of fun. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.